Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Kaylee and this is Foodie Friday. Foodie Friday is a weekly segment where I invite you guys into my kitchen. We cook together and I teach you how to make super fun, healthy, and delicious recipes that the entire family will enjoy. So for this week's episode, I'm gonna teach you how to make healthy cinnamon rolls. So we're gonna take that traditional cinnamon roll recipe, put a healthy twist on it, and still get super fluffy, super delicious cinnamon rolls. So without further ado, let's get to baking. Okay guys, we're gonna start off by making our dough. So add 2 cups of dairy-free milk to a large mixing bowl. Make sure that your milk is just slightly warmed. Then we're gonna add 1/2 cup of raw cane sugar. This is just a more healthy, less processed alternative to the traditional white sugar. Then we're gonna add 1/2 cup of coconut oil. You can substitute this for 1/2 cup of melted vegan butter, but just incorporate these ingredients together. Allow that sugar to get really good and incorporated because that is going to feed our next ingredient, which is our active dry yeast. So you'll add 2 1/4 teaspoon or 1 packet of active dry yeast to this mixture. We're going to use our spoon and just mix these ingredients together, allow that sugar and yeast to meet so the yeast can be fed, and then we're going to sit this mixture aside and allow the yeast to bloom. Allowing your yeast to bloom will help give rise to our cinnamon rolls in the future, so this step is very important. Do not skip it. The next step is adding our flour to our wet ingredients. So we're going to add 4 cups of sifted whole wheat flour to our wet ingredients. I cannot emphasize enough, you need to sift your flour before adding it to your wet ingredients. This is going to create a very light and airy texture in our cinnamon rolls that we really want. You want these to be super fluffy and delicious, so please sift your flour. So you'll notice that the dough isn't necessarily forming, it's just kind of making this super sticky, wet mess. That's totally fine. We're gonna add more flour in the future, so trust the process. Incorporate your dry ingredients into your wet ones, so that way you get this kind of messy, sticky texture. And once those are well incorporated, we are gonna cover this with either cellophane wrap or you can do a kitchen towel, and we're gonna let it rise for an hour. There's 2 rises in this recipe, and this is the first one. So clear off your kitchen spoon, cover with your cellophane wrap, and you can place this in a warm environment to rise for 1 hour. I always put mine in my microwave. I'll turn my microwave on for 2 minutes before I add my bowl. Let it get nice and warm in there, and then once the timer goes off, stick my dough in there and let it rise for an hour. This will create a really great rise for your dough. While our dough rises, let's make our filling. We're gonna start with 3/4 cup of vegan butter, 3/4 cup of coconut sugar, and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. So I always like to mix these 3 ingredients together and create kind of like a paste. That way I get a really good even distribution of all of my filling ingredients on my cinnamon rolls. So we're gonna just whisk these together. One thing I would like to note is you can swap out vegan butter for coconut oil. It works the same. Flavor doesn't really change. I prefer coconut oil, but I personally ran out, so I just used the vegan butter that we had. But whisk these together and then set in your fridge to allow for it to kind of firm up and create a paste. Now that our dough has risen, it should have almost doubled in size, we're gonna add 1/2 cup of bread flour. Note that the recipe says 1/2 cup to a full cup. This will just kind of depend on the environment that you're in, how much flour you'll need, but just add 1/2 cup to start. We also added 1 teaspoon of baking powder as well as 2 teaspoons of salt. So add these ingredients in, mix together with your kitchen spoon, kind of start to incorporate your dough. Eventually we're gonna move on to a hard surface and we're gonna knead. If you have a KitchenAid mixer, you're more than welcome to just add your dough hook attachment and allow it to do the work for you, but I'm old school and I like to knead with my hands. So we're gonna knead our dough for 10 minutes, but I always kind of start in the bowl with my hands, kind of getting our mixture incorporated, kind of the dough is forming. It'll be a little scraggly at first, that's fine. We're gonna turn this out onto a hard surface and knead. So one thing I'd like to point out is I'm using a large glass cutting board. You can use your countertop as long as it's clean, or if you have a pastry board because you're fancy like that, then I would suggest using that. I wish I had one, but maybe in the future. So I'm gonna use my little baby muscles and knead this for 10 minutes. Your dough is gonna be very sticky and elastic, so just kind of Add pinches of flour here and there. That's why I always say add, half a cup to start. You do not want to dry this dough out. It'll make for a very tough and not fluffy cinnamon roll, which is what we're trying to avoid. So knead with your muscles, get that exercise in before you eat your cinnamon rolls. And once the dough stops sticking to your hand is kind of when you'll know it's ready. It'll start to smooth out. So just add pinches of flour where you can. Be very careful with this and just knead. Once your dough kind of forms together into a ball, go ahead and do the poke test. I take my thumb, stick it into the dough, and as long as it kind of springs back, that's when I know it's ready. It's, elasticy looking. Now it's time to roll our dough out. So I always form kind of a rough rectangle. That's the shape we're gonna go for. It just makes rolling your dough out that much easier. So I suggest using a pastry board. Make sure your surface is floured. If you don't have a pastry board, you can use a cutting board like me, or you can just use your countertop as long as it's clean to roll your dough out. We're gonna try to get about 1/2 inch thick of dough, between 1/4 or 1/2 inch. Just roll it out till it's nice and thin. Don't be like me and keep your tablecloth underneath. It made things very difficult, as you can see. Once your dough is rolled out, go ahead and add your filling. I just take the mixture that we created and make sure it's softened, and I just smooth it all over the dough. This is literally my favorite part. It is so satisfying. Now it's time for my favorite part, rolling the cinnamon rolls. Usually this is my favorite part, but I forgot to flour my surface, so I kind of struggled with this. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't film the whole rolling process just because I had to get kind of around my camera setup. My belly is getting so big and it was really difficult to roll these with my camera in the way. So I just sped this up so you can kind of get the idea of how to roll. Just get your spirals as tight as possible. Now that our dough has been rolled, it's time to slice. So I usually use a piece of dental floss to kind of measure out my rolls before I slice them. I do about 1-inch rolls. This should yield 10 to 12 rolls. And I always use my dental floss to slice these as well. It just creates a very even, round slice instead of using a kitchen knife, which kind of squishes your rolls down. So place these in a greased dish. I usually use either vegan butter or coconut oil. And just make sure you place these a little bit apart. I do about 6 rolls per dish. You can use your 9x13 pan and put all 12 rolls, but you'll want to leave room for them to rise. One reason I love this recipe is you can freeze these rolls at this step and use them at a later date. So oftentimes I'll cover them with double layers of cellophane wrap and place in my freezer, and that way I can use these when I have guests and just pop them in the oven, and they still taste super delicious and fresh. So check the recipe out for more details, but you're gonna let these rise for 30 to 40 minutes or until they've doubled in size like so. Now we're gonna make our frosting. So I like to kind of deck this out. These are super indulgent, so we're gonna veer away from the traditional powdered sugar milk frosting. So we're gonna start with 1 cup of powdered sugar, 4 ounces of dairy-free cream cheese, 1 to 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 4 tablespoons of dairy-free milk, and 2 tablespoons of melted dairy-free butter. You can add these in any order that you like as long as you whisk them together and create a smooth texture. One thing I'd like to point out is I will next time do my cream cheese and butter mixture kind of together first in a separate bowl, and then add that to my powdered sugar, milk, and vanilla extract. That'll just create a more smooth texture. But this is still gonna be a slightly runny frosting. I like it like that just because it can get all into the cracks and crevices of my cinnamon roll. But do what you like. If you wanna add a little extra cream cheese to make it thick, or a little extra powdered sugar to thicken it up, you're more than welcome to do so. But I'll link all of my favorite dairy-free vegan alternative options in the description box below. Also, you can find all of the ingredients as well as the recipe in the description box below. So be sure to check that out after the video is over. One thing I didn't mention is make sure your cream cheese is room temp or softened. That way you can get a really creamy mixture to drizzle all over those cinnamon rolls. right, you guys, our cinnamon rolls came out of the oven. I allowed them to cool for about 10 to 15 minutes before I frosted them. I went ahead and poured some frosting on, made sure I spread it all through the cracks of the cinnamon roll. So now I'm going to try them, and I'm gonna get Brad to come and help me try them, and this time I will not cut his head off.
Thank you, ma'am.
I didn't get forks, but we can just be messy.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm gonna take the middle one. You're not even waiting.
No way.
Oh my gosh, they're really hot still.
Oh, that's so good. Good, good, good.
Okay,
Try it out.
let's do it. Oh my gosh, you can't even tell.
They're good. Taking this one.
Okay, thanks, love you.
Love you.
All right, you guys, I'm gonna take my cinnamon roll into the living room, put my feet up, and devour the rest of it. As always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so. I look forward to seeing you guys next week when we cook another delicious dish. Bye, guys.